Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and this is everything you need to know about the traits in Warcraft Rumble. So I'm going to be covering every single trait, and I'm going to try to talk a little bit about how many maybe of each should you have in a deck. So we'll jump right into it, but just before we do so, guys, please, if you love the content, make sure to like and subscribe. And also, guys, I'm going to be streaming tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, so if you guys are there, please come by. I'm gonna be making so much more content about the game. So if you guys want to be there along for the ride, just click subscribe. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, what are traits? So basically, traits are like keywords that are assigned to every single character. So if I take, for example, the ghoul here, his traits are going to be melee, tank, cycle, one target, and cannibalize. So first of all, why are traits important? Some traits basically are not only there to describe, but they're also there because of the slot feature in this game, or I'm not sure how they call it. But basically, some slots in your deck are going to be locked to certain traits, or basically if you play a troop with the right trait in this slot, they're going to get a buff, right? So some level buff. So that's why it's important to know all the traits, but also it's important to know what they do to be able to outplay your opponent and just to be able to upgrade faster in the campaign. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into our first one, and this is the tank trait. So the tank trait, a lot of units have the tank trait. I like to use frontline as well, as another term. So if you guys hear frontline, usually it's a tank. There's the front line and there's the back line. So the front line is what is going to be in the front, or it is usually a tank, and a tank is what soaks up the damage. And then you have your damage dealers that are in the back line that are going to deal the damage. So the front line is your tank, and then the back line is your damage dealers, right? So yeah, we have the tank. How many tanks do you want in deck? Usually at least one. You want at least one tank, but maybe two, even perhaps three. But I would say the golden rule would be like two. Having two tank is really good, and then you would want some backlines. So, for example, in this list, we have the Ghoul, which is a tank. We have the Son of Torin, which is also a tank. And then for the backline, we have 1, 2, 3 backline. And I think Gromash, he's somewhat of a tank, but not really. He's more of a bruiser. Yeah, but he still has a tank trait. But yeah. All right, so we know what is a tank, but there's different types of tank. We have two different traits that apply to tanks, usually to tanks. We have the armored trait, and we have the resistant trait. So this is really important for you guys to know the difference, okay? And to understand the difference, you need to understand what is physical damage and what is elemental damage. So physical damage is basically every damage that would be from like kinetic energy. So basically, bow, arrows, swords, blunt objects, all of those should be physical damage, and everything that is like spell or magic is elemental damage. So for example, the Bat Rider tosses flames underground, so this would be elemental damage. You can still see it in the trait list, but I mean, this is a good way to understand which one is which. So now you understand that there's two types of damage. They both do the same, right? They do damage. But one is elemental and one is physical, right? There comes the armor trait and the resistant trait. So the armor trait takes 50% less damage from physical damage, right? We can see here, the Footman, for example, armored, 50% physical damage reduction. This is really important because it means it's a really good tank against a unit that does, for example, here, the Warsong Raider, physical damage. So armored, good against physical damage. But your opponent knows you're going to play armored. Let's say some armored unit. Then they're going to play their elemental units to counter that. So that's why you have also some resistant units. So resistant unit are basically the opposite. The resistant unit are going to be resistant to elemental damage, so they're going to take 50% less damage from elemental damage. All right, so really important to know the difference between the two, because when you're creating a tank, you need to, in your deck, you need physical damage and you need elemental damage. Because if you only have physical damage and your opponent plays any armored units, you're screwed. And if you only have elemental damage, your opponent plays resistant trait, you're screwed. So you need at least a little bit of both. For example, here, all of the Murloc, the Darkspear Troll, the Stonehoof Tauren, Gromash, and the Ghoul do physical damage, but at least we have the Frostfall Shaman and the Safe Palette that do elemental damage. So we do have some elemental damage, though it's not that much. Maybe this isn't the most balanced deck, but you guys understand the idea that you need to have both in your deck. All right, so we have a rock, paper, scissors with the damage dealers, right? So we have some melee units indicated by the sword. So these are units that are going to be obviously attacking from close range. And these melee units are going to be very good against ranged units. We can see here the Darkspear Troll getting destroyed, right? Because once they close the gap, the ranged unit don't have much health, so the melee unit are going to destroy the ranged unit. However, the ranged unit are going to destroy the air unit. So there's some... the ranged units are going to be very good against the aerial units because the melee units just can't deal with them. So, yeah, ranged unit really good against air units, and melee units really good against ranged units. So then, to close the cycle of the rock, paper, scissors, we have that the air units are very good against melee units. Right, that makes sense. The air units can attack the melee units, and the melee units usually can't. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Right, so in a deck, normally you would want a few melee, a few range unit, and perhaps a few air unit as well. Right. Now we have another rock, paper, scissors. Right, we have Swarm versus single target versus AoE. So Swarm, what are Swarm units? Swarm units basically are all units that spawn more than one. So let's say we have the Footmans. The Footmans are spawned in a bunch of 4, so that means they're Swarm units. So Swarm units are going to be very good against single target unit because these single target units are going to get surrounded and then they're going to be destroyed by the Swarm of unit. However, the single target units are going to be very good against the AoE units. So we'll get to AoE in just a minute. But yeah, the single target units deal a lot of single target damage. So they're going to be very good against the AoE units. So what is an AoE unit? An AoE unit is a unit that does what we call splash damage, or AoE for area of effect, an area of damage instead of a single target. So imagine our opponent plays some Angry Chicken Army. So Angry Chicken Army would be just a big swarm of chickens. Well, then you could play an AoE unit, and that AoE unit is going to basically one-shot all of these chicken at once. While a single target unit is going to have to pick them one by one, making the single target unit very bad against Swarm, but AoE unit very good against Swarm. And then once again, Swarm beats AoE. All right, so this is another rock, paper, scissors we have here. Then for the cycle trait, what is a cycle trait? Cycle trait is basically any mini or spell that costs 2 gold or less. We can see here in the list. Nothing more to add to that. Why is cycle important? Cycle is important because we want in a deck the ability to come back to our win conditions, right? So if you have only expensive unit, it's going to be very hard to go back to your win conditions. So let's say in this list, our win condition would have been our Stonehoof Tauren, right? But then you play the Stonehoof Tauren, and then your opponent is going to play something to counter the Stonehoof Tauren. Well, then you want to go back to your Stonehoof Tauren before your opponent can go back to his counter. So that's why you need some cycle units. So cycle units are very good to do that, because once they get countered by something, they can cycle back in time so that your opponent doesn't have the counter back. So just a reminder how it works. When you have 7 troop in your deck, 8 including the minor, right? And you start with 4. Once you play one, you get a random one slotted in, but then it becomes like a list, right? So you have to play 4 more units to go back to the first unit you played. So yeah, cycle units are important. That's you can see in this deck. We have the Ghoul and the Murlocs. Those are 2 cycle units. I like to have at least 2, I think, in every deck if possible. Yeah. Here is the elemental damage that I mentioned earlier. So like you can see, it's basically all mage or all fire type damage or spells. Basically all spells are elemental damage. Here's the tank. Next up we have Unbound. So Unbounds are very interesting. Unbounds are a troop that you can place anywhere on the map. So this is very, very important because, and it's very strong because you can basically distract enemies by playing an unbound unit like behind them, and then they're going to start focusing in behind them, and your front line is going to crash in their back and destroy them. So unbound unit can be very, very good. Not every single list require an unbound mini, but I would say that most of them should at least have one, especially to get those chests. So in maps, there's chests. When you destroy the chest, you get 2 gold. So basically, having some unbound minis are really good because you can contest those chests very early on when the game starts. So yeah. Next up, we have the fast trait. Very, very simple, as the name as it may seem. These units are very fast, as the name would suggest. So, for example, the Huntress is a fast unit. We have also, what other, the Warsong Raider is a fast unit, the Harpies. So the fast units are not necessary in the deck, but it's very good to catch up in a gap between you and your army. So let's say your army is like already pushed and you want something to support, you want to send reinforcement, well, fast minis are really good to catch up. Or let's say you're fighting on one side of the battlefield, well, then you can play a fast mini in the other to put pressure where your opponent might not expect it. So fast mini is really, really good. Then we have Bombard, right? I think, yeah. So Bombard, the Bombard trait basically is attack ground enemies only, and I think they all do AoE damage. So it's an AoE damage, but only to the ground, if I'm not mistaken. And then finally, there's many other traits, but for the big important ones, the siege one. So the siege trait is very, very good. What it does double damage against structures. This is very, very good, especially for like the gargoyle like that we have here. So when you play a siege unit, what you want is always to support it, because if you play a siege mini, it's going to get destroyed by other units. It's basically a win condition. So you want to help your siege unit to get to a tower, and that's how you're going to win the game. You don't have to play any siege unit. Some decks take advantage of the siege. Like, for example, here in my Grommash list, I don't have any siege units. But if you do, try to have something to support it. So, yeah, guys, this is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, make sure to subscribe. I'm gonna make so much more content about the game. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys. Take care.